So I had the opportunity to talk with my friend Jim Grinstead of the Scams and Cons podcast about pretend, and I think if you like my show, you're going to love Jim's show. Check it out.
The crimes we usually talk about on Scams and Cons are about money. But when it comes to impersonators, swiping cash isn't always the goal. Their actions are still criminal, but motives can be much more sinister. It's time for me to introduce Javier Leiva. Javier hosts and produces a podcast called Pretend. It's about people who pretend to be someone else. It's a great podcast, and I highly recommend it. You'll find a link to it in the show notes. I invited Javier on the podcast to talk about imposters who aren't in it for the money. His thinking on that came after a conversation with his cousin.
I knew that my cousin was a bad guy. Like, everybody has a black sheep in the family, and I knew that he was about to go to federal prison, but I didn't know why, or I didn't know the details. So one day I said, "Hey, Eric, can we sit down? Can you tell me your story? I'm doing this podcast." And we sat down, and he spoke to me for 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember, but he told me everything from the time he was a small-time crook breaking into cars to how that progressed to breaking into houses, to insurance fraud where he was staging car accidents, to the time where he really matured as a criminal and opened up his own health clinic, his own medical clinic, and hired a real doctor to write real prescriptions for opioids. And that ultimately led to his arrest, or one of the many arrests. But my jaw dropped when I heard that because I didn't know the details. And after that interview with my cousin, that's when I realized that Pretend is a show about deception. It's a show about con artists and trying to understand their motivation and their psyche.